G'day, I'm Joel Rasmussen from Fight News Australia, and today I'm at Absolute MMA in Collingwood, joining Joseph Luciano. Jose, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, mate. It's good to have you down the gym and show you around the place and the facility we've got, and it's nice to do an interview in person too.
Absolutely, this is my first interview in person, so I do appreciate it. And yes, we're going to have to pass the mic back and forth. It's a little bit awkward, but I'm sure we'll manage. So the first question I wanted to ask you, obviously fighting for a pro title, but I did want to look back a little bit at the amateur career. I've got the list of the first places you fought. I'm going to run through them all. So you make your amateur debut in mixed martial arts in Vegas, and then again you fight in Singapore, and then Bahrain, and then you do get to fight in Melbourne, but then after that you fight in South Africa, and then Bahrain again. You then turn pro and fight for one in Singapore. So now, how good does it feel to be able to fight and get some consistent fights back home?
Yeah, it's fantastic, mate. What that actually doesn't show, I think that's probably from Tapology, right? I actually fought in the States 3 times before that and had a few more amateur fights back in the early days when stuff wasn't recorded. So most of my fights have been overseas or, different places in Oz. So, it's just run of the mill for me, but it is nice. I've got some family coming up, some mates coming up, which is good. I haven't really had that before. So yeah, there is a nice little sentimental value to that for sure.
Being able to fight overseas, so often, even mentioning it there, the ones that we don't know about. I know you've got a very storied amateur career, especially when you're fighting in the IMMAF, where I've heard you talk about it in other interviews, where you don't know who you're going to fight. You show up and it's like my style against this person. When it's at the early stages of your career, how beneficial is that to forming your style that you can adapt to multiple people?
I think as with most things, variety is a bit of the spice of life. So it's always been good. You never know what's going to happen. And then that's set me up for my pro career, where you can be a little more specific with your prep for your opponent, because you basically know who you're going to fight, notwithstanding an injury or something like that. So I suppose it's taken the edge off for the pro fights. Like, I went into the stuff in overseas or the IMAF things, or even, the local amateur shows, the fights change rapidly. So you don't know what to prepare for, and you just focus on your game. And then taking that into the pro ranks, I'm sort of established with how I fight, and then I can tweak a few little things for the upcoming opponent.
Talking about that tweaking, now that you have turned pro and you've got multiple pro fights under your belt, multiple pro wins, how important is that tweaking? Do you go into a fight camp going, this is what my opponent does, I'm going to do this and this to counter it? Or is it like, I'm just going to focus on putting my game out there better than he can put his game out there?
That's actually a really good question. And I'll say probably what differentiates me from a lot of guys, I've been doing this sport a long time, but my skill development has been constant because I'm constantly working on myself and improving my own game. You can see, how my style's sort of changed and developed over the years. But what I will say is having Simon Carson, who's our head coach, he's brought in a different element to how I've gone about it. He's very specific and he's fantastic at reading people in their game. So mixing sort of my natural approach, which is self-development and, improving, widening the base pyramid of skills, and then having Simon that's super specific has been fantastic.
Looking at those amateur fights, I've heard you talk about this before, that you think it's really good to have like a large base of amateur fights. Both, you've got large base of amateur fights in mixed martial arts, and then you were a Muay Thai fighter before you did that. Was there a set number? We talked about how things weren't recorded. The number on Tapology I saw was 16. I've heard you talk about it's closer to double that, if not around 35. Was 35 like the number that you wanted, or when did you know, let's make this jump to professional?
So my previous coach, Ed Bavlock, and I went to the first IMAFs that we did, not really knowing what the go was with it. So I just went there, I finished top 8 and went, fuck, like I've finished top 8 in the world. I had a big break from training and just sort of walked into this by happen chance. Maybe let's do another one before I go pro. and win the thing, and that'll give me a nice platform to sort of jump off. Well, I went and did another one and I didn't win. I finished, I got a bronze medal. So I went, I can't, being the type of guy I am, I can't let it go. So I think I did a few more, won some regional golds, and then at Worlds I got 2 bronze. And then, my coach said to me, mate, you're not getting any younger. Let's give it a rest. Like, you're a bit of a dog on a bone, but if you want to go pro, let's do it now. And one was doing a thing where they had like a development series called One Warrior series. So I got asked to go on that. So I thought, I've been fighting overseas. I love fighting overseas. I'll jump on that. And that was sort of the launch into the pro ranks. There wasn't a set number. It was just like I couldn't let that bronze medal go, but I had to anyway. So yeah.
Now, looking at the pro career, yet again using Tapology as a reference, especially recently, it's a very, very busy schedule for you. It's been every 3 months there's been a fight nearly. How are you finding being so active? Has that really improved the game?
Yeah, so my first 2 pro fights, I was still working 70 hours a week as an electrician, doing HVAC, which is air conditioning. And being tied up with one, the schedule's not as consistent as what you can sort of get back home in Oz. So once, COVID and all of that, I've lost 2 prime years of my athletic career. And I went, fuck this. Like, I want to be active. And Simon was of the same mind. Like, if you want to have a run at this thing, let's rack up the fights. Let's rack up the wins and see how far you can go.
I've spoken to other fighters that have mentioned this, plus just in general, we've talked about it just before we started recording, how kind of small the scene is. When you've started to put together these wins and so quickly back to back to back, is there any difficulty getting booked? People not wanting to really fight you?
Look, I would say I'm very much a fighter's fighter. I don't really mess around with any of that stuff. I don't really care about the politics of it. I leave that all to management. Give me a fight. I don't care who it is. If people are saying no, they're saying yes. I don't want to be caught up in the drama. I'm a fighter's fighter and I'm an athlete. I'm not there for John Smith doesn't want to fight me because I'm really good. No one cares about that's hometown shit. I'm not interested in being the hometown hero. I want to shoot for the stars, So I'm sure there's been heaps of people that have said, I don't want to fight him, or that have gone, yeah, I want to fight him, and it's just never, the stars haven't aligned. So I don't really buy into that stuff too much, yeah.
We mentioned it just a little bit before, but started as a Muay Thai striker, and then I will talk about it a little bit later, but then in 2022 you went back and did have a kickboxing pro fight. But in another interview I was listening to, you said you consider yourself a striker, you're not a submission guy. However, a look at your pro record sees 4 submission victories, and I out loud said, not a submission guy. How have you found coming to the grappling? How do you find it?
So I actually was originally at a gym called Kimikai MMA, and I only ever wanted to fight K1 and Muay Thai. That was my dream. I thought the MMA stuff was, you're rolling around on the ground. It's not my bag. And then got into MMA. Long story short, didn't really like jiu-jitsu at all. Wrestling was the bridge for me between the striking and the grappling, because you can kind of hit people when you wrestle. It's, you're spear tackling them and there's a lot of physical contact. So eventually with that, I sort of went, this jiu-jitsu stuff's all right if I can wrestle. And then next thing I know, I've got 4 subs, and I'm still saying I'm not a jits guy, but it turns out maybe I am. Let's call it submission grappling. I don't want to be called a jiu-jitsu guy.
You don't want the label. Nah. Can't deal with the label. It's my own thing. Along with being a pro fighter, you also coach here at Absolute Mixed Martial Arts, including, if I believe you have coached in IMMAF tournaments. How do you find coaching versus being coached?
It's much, for me, it's much easier to be coached. If someone says, hey mate, do this, yep, bang, I'll do it. One of the interesting things I've found being a coach is obviously fighters are like a bunch of cats. You're herding a bunch of cats. They're not really cattle dogs. So that can be interesting with personalities and different group dynamics and all of that. Not everyone just goes, oh, yes, sir, no, sir. So I'd say probably, look, I think my technical coaching skills is good, very good. I'm super experienced across all different ranges, but the thing that it's made me develop the most is being able to coach unusual athletes, which is probably a polite way of saying what fighters are.
Have you transitioned into that coach role? Does that ever help you when being coached? Does it give you like another perspective on how to do things?
Definitely, and it's given me, not that I never respected my coaches, but it's like given me a window into how they're going about it, how I've had to go about it, and I've taken some pieces from them in my approach to coaching and added that into my own thing. But being coached has always been a natural thing for me. I played fairly high level soccer as a kid, so yeah, I've been an athlete my whole life. It's just the way it goes for me, so it's pretty easy. Yeah.
Talking about being an athlete, we will come to the soccer a little bit in a second, but if I'm not mistaken, your partner is a personal trainer.
Yeah.
When you're in the midst of camp, you're coming towards the end of the camp, you're going into a fight, you come here, you train, and then you go home, and then is she there to help and be like, remember, eat healthy and all that? Does that really help kind of bring another level when you're in camp, when your partner is also so involved in athleticism?
Yeah, so she's actually does jits and boxes and does a lot of the classes here, which is pretty funny when I have to coach her. And she's a remedial massage, so we've got the full spectrum of recovery and everything going on at home. Gets a little annoying when she tries to do some techniques on me after a big day of work and training, but she's super supportive, and yeah, I can't complain really. Like, yeah, it's being a fighter's hard, but I'd say being a fighter's partner is probably a little bit harder because you don't choose it just happens. Yeah.
I mentioned it just before, but in February of 2022, you went back and you had, well, I say went back, but you went and you had a professional kickboxing bout. Obviously, kickboxing different to Muay Thai, but still, how was it to go back to just purely striking?
So I think we did like a 4-week camp or 3-week camp for it. Yeah, it was cool. Look, I will say the training for striking is less physically demanding. You're not going to get injured and hurt, but the fights are way harder. Whereas the training for MMA is grueling, but you can finish a fight with a sub and walk away and train the next day. So, after the kickboxing fight, I won, didn't get banged up too much, but my shins were busted from kicking his legs. My hands were sore from bouncing them off his head. And I went, geez, it is a rough way to fight. I'll do anything for the right money. Not really anything, but hey, everyone's got a price. So, that it was fun. It was good thing to, have a block of just working on the striking again. Pay was good. Came out of it all good. So yeah, it was fun. It was fun, man.
How was then just doing the pure striking at the professional level? Because obviously you had amateur.
I'd say, I probably approached it exactly the same as I've had. I've always had good coaches that, the difficulty with the fight sports is it's not just going to go play footy, right? Like you risk your health in there, so take it seriously or don't do it at all. So I've been doing that from the start of my career.
Talking about, it's not just playing footy, and you mentioned it before, you played high-level soccer. I was wondering, how did you make that swap from high-level soccer to, mixed martial arts or even Muay Thai? And then how have you found the difference? What was kind of that first, day like?
It's funny, you don't think of soccer as a great base for mixed martial arts or Muay Thai, really, considering you see the guys diving around and rolling around when they get touched. But the way I played was probably like a fighter playing soccer, not really a soccer player playing soccer. But the things I will say is I was in a system, I went to the AIS, trained, played. in camps, stuff like that. And, you know, as a 10-year-old, we were sat down with a sports nutritionist and spoken about, you know, visualizing before bed and how you're going to play. And, you know, you need electrolytes because you're playing 3 games in a day. And so the system that I was in prepared me for a later athletic career as a professional, because, you know, as a 10-year-old sitting down, you know, doing plunge pulls at the AIS and then the hot baths and plunge pulls, and then being told to visualize before you go to bed and checking your heart rate in the morning to check that you're over, you know, under or over or covered. So that was a great base. So I suppose then when I started training martial arts, it was like, oh, this is a bit less intense in that regard, but physically it's extremely demanding. So kind of combined the two. And yeah, I've done that from the very start of, I wouldn't even call what I was doing at the start of career compared to what I'm doing now, but I've had that really good base, athletic base. So yeah.
So you've, you know, almost, as you mentioned, they're 10 years old. There's been that, like, have you always, in a way, felt you were kind of like destined to be an athlete? And then, because from 10 years old, I don't think I knew what an electrolyte was when I was 10 years old, let alone get more of them in you.
I wouldn't say destined, but some people, you know, you see them, some people are great at accounting. I was never going to be great at accounting. Some people are, you know, great at everything they do. I was never going to be that. Hard work with a little bit of talent has sort of gotten me to where I am, and a real sense of self-belief at whatever I applied myself to, and this has been it. So, you know, the old thing of it's not the destination, it's the journey. So, you know, maybe it probably would have been better if I had have applied myself to something that makes some money. But, you know, that's life, and here I am. So I can't complain, but I wouldn't say destined, but it's worked out that way for sure.
You touched on before just then that visualization process. I know a lot of fighters go through that, but you were talking about it when you were 10 years old. You've been taught to do that. How is visualization help you when you're in camp?
So, you know, you might call it daydreaming, but when I wake up, you know, I'll envision how the fight goes, how training goes, what I'm going to apply myself to that day. I suppose, you know, in this new age, people are calling it meditation. You can call it whatever you want, but, you know, last thing I do before I go to bed, I visualize my future, whether that be the bout, you know, me as a 40-year-old man with, you know, leathery skin laying on a beach somewhere. But yeah, I will visualize every single day, and sometimes that becomes a reality, sometimes it doesn't, but I've found more often than not it does, so it's a vital part of my training for sure.
Talking about this camp, this is, you know, as far as I know, this is the first shot at professional championship. Does that change the camp at all? You're no stranger to, you know, going for the gold, you know, through your amateur career, but is anything different now? Is it, you know, you're going for a title?
I've had people say, oh, are you feeling the pressure? No, not at all. The only pressure out there is the pressure I put on myself, which is immense no matter what I'm doing. So that's not a burden that I struggle to bear. Due to the nature of it being a 5-round fight, that changes how we go about training for sure. Different energy requirements, different energy systems. So there's been that change. Opponent specifics too. But apart from that, it's day in, day out, grind every day. You know, we're doing it. So yeah, nothing super different. You know, I reflect back on past fights, the things that didn't go as well as they should have, or, you know, little tweaks we can make. So every camp's an improvement on that. Assessing performances, you know, getting rid of separating the wheat from the chaff type thing. So yeah, same, man, same.
Touched on there, you know, saying your opponent coming up, Kaleb Rideout. There's been, I don't know if you'd necessarily call it bad blood, but there's like some back and forth, you know what I mean? Just a little bit, nothing crazy, just, you know, there's a little bit. When there's stuff like that, we touched before about when you're fighting in tournaments, you don't necessarily know your opponent. When there is that back and forth, is that any way off-putting? Does that change how you go about doing things, or even your mentality, or is it kind of the same day at the office?
I think, the interesting thing about this being a professional sport, it's also entertainment, which is unlike a lot of other sports. So, some people have to do things to sell fights, or that's how they go about it. That's how they get themselves into a place ready for combat, because that's what we're doing, unarmed combat. For me, I have my trigger that gets me in that place. I don't necessarily need to talk a lot of shit. I'll talk some facts when needed, but that's not my nature. I don't try and pretend to be anyone that I'm not. And no one can change or affect who I am and what I am. So I can have a bit of a giggle at some things. So it's the same mental state for me, for sure. Yeah.
You walk into the cage on Saturday the 18th of March at Eternal. It doesn't have to be the song you're walking out to, but for you, what do you think is the ultimate walkout song?
I have a couple of songs that I really like because they resonate to me, being a young man, grinding away, doing some silly things. So I like a bit of Shook Ones, walking into the cage. For me, that's definitely the track that gets me in the vibe. Maybe to be great, fighting a big international fight in Australia, for some real, have a bit of real Aussie classic, some Jimmy Barnes or something, have the crowd going off. That'd be pretty cool. But for these fights, I like some East Coast rap, old school East Coast rap. So yeah.
Very nice. Thank you very much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.